He's just your ex's kid." The words hit like a slap across the face, spoken loud enough for everyone in the living room to hear. My father-in-law stood there, arms crossed, watching as his biological grandsons tore open boxes containing brand new bikes, high-end drones, and crisp 200. My 8-year-old son Danny sat on the couch, hands folded in his lap, staring at the empty space where his gift should have been. "My name is Sarah Chen, and I thought I'd finally found my safe harbor. After 3 years of brutal divorce proceedings, custody battles, and rebuilding my life from scratch, I'd married David Martinez 6 months ago. David was everything my ex-husband wasn't: kind, patient, and most importantly, he loved Danny like his own son. Or so I thought. The divorce had been a nightmare. My ex-husband, a successful corporate lawyer, had tried to paint me as an unfit mother, claiming I was too unstable to have primary custody. The irony wasn't lost on me. He was the one who'd been having an affair with his paralegal for 2 years. But money talks, and good lawyers cost more than I could afford on my teacher's salary. I'd met David at Danny's school during a parent-teacher conference. He was there for his twin boys, Marcus and Miguel, who were in Danny's class. His wife had passed away from cancer 2 years earlier, and he was navigating single parenthood just like I was. We bonded over juice boxes and the shared exhaustion of bedtime routines. David's family had been welcoming at first. His parents, Rosa and Eduardo, had immigrated from Mexico in the 1970s and built a successful construction business. They prided themselves on family values, on taking care of their own. During our courtship, they'd included Danny in everything: birthday parties, Sunday dinners, even their annual summer camping trip. But something shifted after the wedding. Small things at first. Danny's place setting would be forgotten at family dinners. His artwork wouldn't make it onto Rosa's refrigerator gallery like the other grandchildren's did. When I'd bring it up to David, he'd make excuses. "Mom's just getting older," he'd say. "She probably just forgot." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him, because the alternative meant I'd made the same mistake twice, choosing someone who couldn't truly love my son. Danny was my everything. At 8 years old, he had this incredible ability to find joy in the smallest things. A butterfly in the garden could make his whole day. He'd spend hours building elaborate Lego cities, creating stories for each tiny resident. When David and I got married, Danny had whispered to me during the ceremony, "Does this mean I get a dad now?" The innocence in that question broke my heart and filled it simultaneously. Danny barely remembered his biological father, who'd moved across the country after the divorce and rarely called. David stepping into that role seemed like a miracle, until moments like these reminded me that not everyone saw Danny as worthy of love. What made it worse was how Danny handled the rejection. He never complained, never asked why he was treated differently. He'd just smile that brave little smile and say, "It's okay, Mom, I don't need presents." But I'd catch him sometimes, staring at his stepbrothers with a longing that made my chest tight. Marcus and Miguel were good kids, but they were also 8 years old, and didn't understand the family dynamics at play. They'd gotten used to their grandfather's favoritism, accepting it as normal. Sometimes I'd see them playing with their new toys while Danny watched from the sidelines, and I'd want to scream at the unfairness of it all. The months following our wedding were a careful balance of hope and heartbreak. I threw myself into making our blended family work. I coached Marcus and Miguel's soccer team, helped with homework, and treated them exactly like I treated Danny. I thought if I could just be patient enough, kind enough, consistent enough, the rest of the family would follow suit. I took on extra tutoring sessions after school to help with expenses. David was supportive, but his construction business was seasonal, and money was tight. I'd stay up late grading papers and planning lessons, then wake up early to make sure all 3 boys had everything they needed for school. The small victories kept me going. Danny started calling David Papa David, without being asked. The boys began referring to each other as brothers, not stepbrothers. We established new traditions: pizza movie nights on Fridays, pancake breakfasts on Sundays, bedtime stories that rotated between all 3 kids. But the extended family was harder to crack. Eduardo would ruffle Marcus and Miguel's hair when he saw them, then give Danny a polite nod. Rosa would coo over the twins' school achievements, but barely acknowledged Danny's honor roll certificates. It was death by 1,000 cuts, and I could see it wearing on my son. I started keeping a journal during this time, documenting the incidents so I wouldn't gaslight myself into thinking I was imagining things. The entries were painful to read. March 15th, Rosa sent care packages to the boys at school. Eminem got homemade cookies and candy. Danny got nothing. When I asked David about it, he said she probably just forgot again. April 2nd, Eduardo took Eminem to the baseball game, didn't invite Danny, said he only had 2 tickets. I saw the game on TV, half the stadium was empty. May 10th, Mother's Day lunch. Rosa gave me a card that said thank you for taking care of our boys. Only mentioned Eminem by name. Each entry was a small betrayal, but I kept hoping things would change. I kept believing that love would win, that family would triumph over biology. The Christmas gathering was at Eduardo and Rosa's house, the same place where I'd first felt welcomed into the family 2 years earlier. Back then, pregnant with hope and new love, I'd sat at their kitchen table helping Rosa make tamales, while the boys played in the backyard. She'd told me then that family wasn't about blood, it was about choice. Walking into that house now, I felt the familiar weight of those early memories pressing against the reality of our current situation. The living room was decorated with family photos spanning decades, but none of them included Danny. Not one. The mantel was filled with school pictures of Marcus and Miguel, but the wallet-sized photo of Danny I'd given Rosa months ago was nowhere to be seen. David's extended family was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all carrying on the tradition of selective inclusion. Danny would try to join conversations with his step-cousins, only to be subtly edged out. I watched him gravitate toward the adults, sitting quietly with his hands in his lap, trying to make himself small enough to be acceptable. The gift exchange was always the highlight of Christmas at the Martinez house. Eduardo would play Santa, calling each child up to receive their presents with great ceremony. I'd prepared Danny for disappointment, whispering that maybe Santa would visit our house later, but I could see the hope in his eyes as he watched his stepbrothers get called up first. When Eduardo announced that those were all the presents, I felt something crack inside my chest. Danny's face fell for just a moment before he carefully reconstructed his smile. "It's okay, Mom," he whispered. "I got to see Marcus and Miguel get their present." That's when Eduardo spoke those words that would change everything. "He's just your ex's kid." The room went silent. Even the adults stopped their conversations. Marcus and Miguel looked confused, still holding their new toys. David's face went pale, but he didn't. He just stared at his shoes like they held the secrets of the universe. I felt the familiar fire rising in my chest, the same protective rage that had carried me through the divorce, through the custody battles, through every moment someone had tried to make my son feel less than. But before I could find my voice, Danny stood up. "Grandpa," he said, his 8-year-old voice carrying more dignity than any adult in that room. "Mom said to hand you this if you ever called me not family again." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a white envelope, sealed and slightly crumpled from being carried around. Every eye in the room was on him as he walked across the living room, past his stepbrothers with their new bikes, past the adults who'd been pretending not to notice the obvious favoritism. Eduardo's face was a mask of confusion and irritation as he took the envelope. "What's this supposed to be?" muttered, but his voice lacked its usual authority. He opened it with the careful precision of someone who suspected they were about to be embarrassed. As he read, his face went through a series of changes: confusion, understanding, then something that looked like fear. The silence stretched on as Eduardo read and reread whatever was in that envelope. His hands started to shake slightly, and Rosa moved closer, trying to peek over his shoulder. "What does it say?" David finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Eduardo looked up, his eyes finding mine across the room. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked uncertain, vulnerable even. "Read it out loud," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos in my heart. "Since you felt comfortable discussing Danny's place in this family publicly, I think everyone deserves to hear what that envelope says." Eduardo's eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape route that didn't exist. This is between us," he stammered. "No," I said, standing up. "This stopped being between us the moment you decided to humiliate an 8-year-old child in front of his family." I walked over to Eduardo and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw him shrink back. Read it, or I will. With shaking hands, Eduardo began to read. Martinez, if you are reading this, it means you have once again made it clear that you do not consider Danny to be part of your family. I have documented every slight, every forgotten birthday, every exclusion over the past 8 months. I have dated photographs of family gatherings where Danny was cropped out of pictures. I have emails where you referred to our grandsons when speaking about only Marcus and Miguel. I have given you chance after chance to treat my son with basic human decency, and you have chosen cruelty so let me be clear. Danny is not just my ex's kid, he is my son, he is David's stepson, he is Marcus and Miguel's brother, and if you cannot accept that, then you are choosing to lose all of us. This is not a threat, this is a boundary. You can choose to be the grandfather who loves all 3 boys equally, or you can choose to be the man who broke up his son's family because he couldn't love a child who shared his name, his home, and his brothers. Danny deserves better than your conditional love, we all do. The room was completely silent except for the sound of Eduardo's breathing. Rosa's hand was covering her mouth, tears streaming down her face. David was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before, like he was seeing me for the first time. There's more, I said quietly. Show them the pictures, Eduardo. With trembling hands, he reached back into the envelope and pulled out a stack of photographs. Birthday parties where Danny stood apart from his stepbrothers. Family dinners where his chair was noticeably smaller. Holiday gatherings where he was physically present but emotionally excluded. This is what you've been doing, I said, my voice gaining strength. This is what you call family value. An 8-year-old child who calls you grandpa, who draws you pictures, who lights up when he sees your truck in the driveway, and you've been systematically breaking his heart. Miguel, who was still holding his new drone, looked up at his grandfather with confusion. Grandpa, why don't you like Danny? The question hung in the air like a physical thing. Eduardo opened his mouth, then closed it. What could he say? That he'd been treating a child poorly because of biology, that his love came with conditions. You want to know what's really sad? I continued. Danny wrote you a Christmas card, it's in his backpack. He practiced the letters for an hour because he wanted to make sure you could read it. He drew a picture of all of us together including you because that's what family meant to him. David finally found his voice. Dad, how could you treat Danny like this? But Eduardo was staring at the photographs, and I could see something breaking in his face. These weren't abstract concepts anymore. They were documented moments of cruelty toward a child who'd done nothing wrong except exist. The Christmas gathering disintegrated after that. David's sister Elena, who had been silent throughout the confrontation, quietly gathered her own children and left. She stopped at the door to hug Danny and whisper, "I'm sorry we didn't speak up sooner." David's brother Carlos stayed long enough to confront his father. "I watched you do this and I said nothing. I'm ashamed of myself." He looked at Danny, then at me. "This isn't who we raised you to be, David. You should have protected your son." That word son seemed to hit David like a physical blow. He knelt down in front of Danny, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry I didn't protect you. You are my son, and I failed you." Rosa approached us hesitantly. "Sarah, I didn't realize," she started, but I held up my hand. "You realized," I said gently but firmly. "You all realized. You just chose to look the other way because it was easier than confronting Eduardo." Eduardo was still holding the photographs, studying them like he was seeing them for the first time. I thought I was protecting my grandsons," he said quietly. "From what?" I asked. "From love? From having another brother who adores them? From learning that families can be built on choice and commitment instead of just biology?" He had no answer for that. David made a decision that surprised everyone, including me. He stood up, took Danny's hand, and looked at his father. "We're leaving, all of us, and we're not coming back until you can treat Danny the way you treat Marcus and Miguel." "David, don't be dramatic," Rosa started, but he cut her off. "No, Mom, this isn't dramatic. This is me choosing my family. All of my family." He looked at his sons, who were watching everything with wide eyes. "Boys, get your coats, we're going home." As we walked toward the door, Marcus tugged on my sleeve. "Mom, Sarah, can Danny play with my new drone when we get home?" I smiled through my tears. "Of course, baby, that's what brothers do." The weeks that followed were a mixture of pain and healing. David threw himself into making amends with Danny, taking him on special outings, and having long conversations about what it meant to be a family. He also started therapy, both individual and family sessions, to work through his own issues with confrontation and people-pleasing. The story of the envelope somehow made its way to social media when Elena shared it with my permission on a Facebook group for blended families. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of parents shared their own stories of step-family challenges, and the support was incredible. A local family therapist reached out to offer free sessions. A bicycle shop owner, having heard about Danny's excluded Christmas, donated a beautiful red bike. Most importantly, other blended families in our area started reaching out, and we began forming a support network of people who understood the unique challenges we faced. Danny blossomed in the weeks that followed. It was as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulder. He started speaking up more, laughing louder, and most importantly, he stopped trying to make himself small. David's commitment to truly being his father, not just in name but in action, gave him a security he'd never had before. Marcus and Miguel too seemed to benefit from the new family dynamic. They started including Danny more naturally in their games, and I noticed them defending him when other kids at school made comments about their different family structure. The most unexpected support came from David's extended family. His cousin Maria called to apologize and invited us to her daughter's quinceañera. "I should have said something at Christmas," she told me. "I have a stepson too and I know how hard it can be. But what you did standing up for Danny like that, it was brave." 3 months after the Christmas incident, we were at the park watching the boys play when Danny came running up to us, grass stains on his knees and dirt under his fingernails. "Papa David," he said, breathing hard from running around. "Can I tell you something?" David scooped him up, settling him on his lap. "Of course, buddy. What's on your mind?" Danny looked at him with those serious 8-year-old eyes. "I used to think maybe I wasn't good enough to be someone's real son, but then I realized I was looking for the wrong thing." "What do you mean?" David asked, his voice gentle. "I was looking for someone who would love me because I was perfect, but you love me even when I'm not perfect, and that's better." David's eyes filled with tears as he hugged Danny close. "You know what, buddy? You're right, that is better, and you are my real son, not because of any papers, or because of who your biological father is, but because you're in my heart. That's what makes it real." I watched them together, my heart full of a different kind of hope than I'd carried before. This wasn't the naive hope of early love, but the deeper, more resilient hope that comes from choosing your family every single day. Later that evening, as I tucked Danny into bed, he handed me a folded piece of paper. "I wrote this for you, Mom, for being brave." I unfolded it to find a drawing of our family, all 5 of us, including Marcus and Miguel, standing in front of a house with a rainbow overhead. At the bottom, in his careful 8-year-old handwriting, he'd written, "Sometimes the best families are the ones you choose." I kissed his forehead and whispered, "You're absolutely right, baby. Sometimes they are." As I turned off his light, I reflected on how far we'd all come. The envelope had been a catalyst, but the real change had come from David's willingness to choose us, from Danny's resilience, and from all of us learning that love isn't about perfection, it's about showing up day after day and choosing each other. Eduardo eventually reached out 6 weeks after Christmas. He asked if he could take Danny to lunch, just the 2 of them. I said yes, but made it clear that this was Danny's choice too. My son, wise beyond his years, agreed to give his grandfather one more chance. I don't know if Eduardo will ever fully understand the damage he caused, or if he'll be able to rebuild that relationship with Danny, but I know that my son will be okay either way. He's learned that his worth isn't determined by other people's ability to love him, and that's a lesson that will serve him for the rest of his life. The envelope had done its job, but the real work, the daily work of choosing love over biology, inclusion over exclusion, courage over comfort, that work continues every single day, and for the first time in my life, I'm not carrying that weight alone.